Daima tinzwa omwari we Daima tinzwa omambo mambo Daima tinzwa omwari we Daima tinzwa omambo wedenga mambo Singabantwana bakho Nkosi yami mambo Singabantwana bakho mveli nqangi Singabantwana bakho mveli nqangi mambo Daima tinzwa omwari we Daima tinzwa omambo Daima tinzwa omwari we So, where I come from, we don't sing and other people listen, right? Where I come from, we all sing together. This is a call and response song. That's why you are feeling the gap, because you are not responding. So I'll call it, and we are all going to sing along. And we are advancing African thought today, isn't it? So siyahamba, sizoibiza, sizohlabelela, sizocula, sizosina sonke. This is a prayer. It is saying, hear us, our Lord. Singabantwana bakho mveli nqangi. Listen to us, hear our prayers, hear our voice. We are talking to you. We expect you to talk back to us. So we're going to sing along, all right? I'm not going to tell you what you're going to do, because you feel it and you know it and you sing along, isn't it? Thank you very much. That's how we do it in Africa. Let's go. Asam, 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 asam. Asam, asam, asam. Yeah, 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 mambo. Yeah, yeah, hey, mambo. Yeah, yeah. Hey, mambo. Yeah, hey, mambo. Yeah, hey, mambo. Yeah, 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 mambo. Yeah, hey, mambo. Yeah, hey, mambo. ae, ae, ma, ae, 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 mambo, ae, ae. Asam. Yeah, 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 mambo, yeah, mambo, yeah, 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 mambo, yeah, mambo, yeah, ah, hey, mambo, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, mambo, ah, hey, ah, singabantwana bakho mvela ingqangi, ah, hey, ma, ah, hey, daimathinzwa umari we. All right, okay, it's okay. I think sisuke sayenza formal kakhulu lento manje. Abantu sebeya sabo kusukuma basine bagiye bathi hayi sekwi-conference sekwi-confa hawu nkosi yami sesizogida manje hawu nkosi yami. It's all right, we'll do this again next time, we'll try this next time. But thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. I think we're gonna do our last song, or yeah, one or two more songs, and then we will hand over to our program director. Kwazi, I guess it's Lizzie, 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 oh Lizzie. Akukho ntombi engithanda njengawe. Kuthanga izulu mangicabanga ngawe. All right, Kwazi has other plans. He's like, nope. I see lap. See me no lens. Jack, just give me a little bit of saxophone, please. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you so very much. Yeah, it's too early in the morning. People are not ready to get down. We'll try it again tomorrow evening. Let's see how we go. Tomorrow evening we'll bring the house down. We'll all be on our feet dancing and, doing it. Kwazi, play something nice and slow. Lizzy, aku kontong bengi tanan jengawe, kutangi Zulu mangi kawangangawe, uzabu ya nini, stand aside, Lizzy, oh Lizzy. Aku kontong bengi tanan jengawe, kutangi Zulu mangi kawangangawe, uzobu ya nini, stand aside.
Ngitawangi bus, ngitawangi taxi, ngitawangi stimela ngaphansi tantakancane.
Malahiko wendizokweli banoye, uzobu ya nini, stand aside.
Ngitawangi bus, ngitawangi taxi, ngitawangi stimela ngaphansi tantakancane.
Malahiko wendizokweli banoye. Introducing Fundo Ntaka on saxophone. Ngicabanga ibhasi, ngicabanga itaxi, ngicabanga isitimela kodwa sithatha kancane. Mana ikhona ngizakhwela ibhanoyi, uzobuya nini? Sithandwa sami.
Oh, Lizzie, 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 oh, Lizzie. Akukhonjombe ngithanda njengawe. Kuthanda izulu manje ngicabanga ngawe.
Uzobuya nini?
Sithandwa sami. Lizzie, Lizzie, oh, Lizzie. Akukhonjombe ngithanda njengawe. Kuthanda izulu manje ngicabanga ngawe.
Uzobuya nini? Sithandwa sami. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very much. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, please let's rise to welcome our special guest of honor, Honorable Minister for Higher Education and Training, Dr. Blade Nzimande. Hello. You know, I told you a few minutes ago that I'm waiting for the clouds to open so that I can greet you good morning. I can tell you now that I've seen the stars. The clouds are open, and with all pleasure, are you ready for this? I'm going to say something. With all pleasure, I say good morning. Thank you very much. I have the undiluted pleasure at this moment to invite to the stage to give us the welcome address none other than the indefatigable Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Zululand, Professor X Mtose. Yes, this is when we clap.
I hope this is working. And indeed, it is. Program Director, Dr. Akpome, thank you very much. The Honorable Minister of Higher Education and Training, Science and Technology, Dr. Bonginkosi Nzimande, Director General of the Department of Higher Education and Training, Dr. Nkosinathi Sishi, I'm hoping he's on the way, and all members of the minister's entourage. Chairperson of Council of the University of Zululand, Ms. N. Kaluza, members of Council of the University of Zululand. Professor M. West from Penn State University, United States. Professor O. Ajiman, the Pan-African Society Foundation, United States. Professor Makoni from Penn State University, who's joining us online. Professor Bewaji, University of West Indies, Jamaica. Professor S. Zondi, University of Johannesburg. Professor Pra, who I hope is online this morning. UniZulu Deputy Vice Chancellors, Professors Nomlomo, Teaching and Learning, Professor Kunene, Research and Innovation, and Professor Siyepe, Institutional Support. UniZulu Deans of Faculties, Professor Khailing, Professor Ntombela, Professor Masocha, Professor Lishwenya, our head of Richards Bay Campus, Professor Moyo, conference organizing team led by Professor Masocha, Professor Ndlovu, Professor Shokane, Dr. Bula, Dr. Opome, and Dr. Nojieza. Thank you for making this day look like this. UniZulu academics, UniZulu students, Ms. Tinantlego for being the organizer as the communication department director, and all guests joining us in person as well as online through various virtual platforms. Molweni, Sanibonani, Dumelang, Habari, Siye Asuburu. Good morning. It gives me pleasure and profound appreciation to welcome you, the highly esteemed delegates, to this inaugural conference whose purpose is to launch our vision and developing the University of Zululand as a node for African thought. We are especially honored to have our Minister of Higher Education and Training and Science and Technology, who has taken time out of his busy schedule to come and grace this occasion. We thank you all because, for us, this is a defining moment for the University of Zululand. This gathering is the first of its kind, not only with the university, but among universities and higher education institutions in South Africa possible throughout the entire continent. It is unique and innovative in its conception, form, and mission. Through the current UniZulu Vision 27, we have taken a bold but worthwhile decision to move beyond creating a discursive space designed to ignite new imaginations about the future trajectory of the university, but also to develop alternative ontological and epistemological orientations anchored on African thought. In this regard, our knowledge and social project at UniZulu is informed by our own African history and identity, which we don't apologize for. We consciously embrace epistemologies of Global South as part and parcel of the geopolitics of knowledge vis-à-vis the problematic epistemologies of the Global North. We embrace African epistemologies in affirmation of our identity as an African university rather than a westernized university in Africa. In the same way, we embrace our semi-rural setting in KwaZulu-Natal in post-apartheid South Africa, and we take seriously the indigenous epistemologies and socio-economic realities of our immediate communities. University of Zululand is thus ideally located to tap into knowledge otherwise that are no longer fully at the immediate disposal of other universities located in urban centers where Western modernity is concentrated. We are also well positioned to harness, among others, long-standing indigenous knowledge practices without compromising our international outlook or denying the influence of what Ali Maziwuri famously described as Africa's triple heritage from within itself, the West, and Islam. It is against this backdrop that we embarked on asserting our identity as a node for African thought, a mission that is expressed not only through this inaugural African Thought Conference, but also officially in our current strategic plan approved by the University Council. To this end, we seek to promote the systematic blending of decolonial, post-colonial, Afrocentric, and Afro-sensed grammars and vocabularies of change. In doing so, we consciously avoid taking a navicist fundamentalist approach while also refusing to follow the crowd with empty sloganeering and or grandstanding. Given that African thought is inherently polyvocal, reflexive, responsive, and dynamic, our mission as a node of African thought is informed by an ecology of plural ideas and diverse ontologies. As our contribution to the broader struggle for the total emancipation of African people in particular and oppressed people in general, we seek to recontract with our local, provincial, national, continental, and planetary publics. We seek a paradigm shift from the colonial ideation and institutional model through which many universities in Africa and elsewhere have been co-opted into hegemonic knowledge systems that alienates them from their respective communities and societies. As we embark on this journey, we are particularly excited about the opportunities that can be created by the University of Zululand becoming a node of African thought. We believe this venture will not only open up scholarship beyond the constraints of Eurocentric colonial theory, but will also chart a way of addressing the agency around the decolonization project. Indeed, drawing insights from Member 2021, the time has come for African higher education to lead in the redrawing of the global intellectual map so that the world can be studied from elsewhere and anywhere and produce knowledge that will have local and global impacts. The optimism that our vision and the inaugural conference generates should, however, be cognizant of the complexities of decolonizing higher education. To begin with, there is a need to grapple with and elaborate on terms and perspectives that this project will have to deploy to regain the power of FERI 1972 refers to as the ability to name the world. That is, reclaiming significance as human beings by making sense of the world as Africans, not through the eyes of the colonizer. In this connection, Hayes et al. 2021 have advocated for the notion of two-eyed seeing, which they argue works to deconstruct the colonial lens and facilitate the practice of cultural safe learning. In so doing, this is open quote now, they say, learning to see one eye with the strength of indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing, and from the other eye with the strength of Western knowledge and ways of knowing, and learning to use both these eyes together for the benefit of all, I close quote. This proposition raises a fundamental question about the advisability and possibility of a one-eyed or two-eyed vision of the envisaged African thought. Ultimately, what choices are made will have implications on how the decolonization of the curriculum will be approached. During the deliberations at this conference, I am sure you will also encounter other intellectual challenges. These relate to, amongst others, the questions on how we conceptualize what it means to be African. On the other hand, does intellectual work become African simply because it is produced or promoted by Africans in Africa? Such a view, according to Higgins, uses a geographical criterion. On the other hand, does the academic work become African if it directs its attention to issues concerning the theoretical and conceptual underpinnings of African culture? This view is seen as using cultural criterion to determine what being an African means. While it may be reasonable to assume that African identity should not be constituted by a case of either or, but rather by both geographical and cultural factors, these may be other related issues that may arise in this gathering. Even as one can settle in with the view that questions emerge which have to do with how African diaspora is incorporated in all this. And with this, what the implications are for our understanding of what can be viewed as African culture. These questions are important given the context of African colonial legacy and the slavery that not only dislocated Africans from their motherland, but also through European cultural hegemony, language became one of the mechanisms for domination and alienation. Drawing from the work of Ngungi Tuang and Pra, Tondi, Fredericks, 2000, they argue that, open quote, as part of the plan, the processes of subjugation and domination did not only have to do with colonized having to inherit alien syntax and lexicology, but also the ways in which they ultimately perceive self and the world, and how to relate to European in their assumed superior status, close quote. By contrast, one of the opportunities that the Node of African Thought Vision presents is one of mobilizing what Gramsci, 1971, calls organic intellectuals. These are scholars, theorists, and social activists of various political persuasions and social movements whose ideas converge to promote processes of emancipation of the oppressed and the relegated people. In other words, the Node of African thought must be composed of a critical mass of network organic intellectuals, like we have done this morning, who will be strategically positioned to undertake numerous tasks that decolonization project entails. The examples might, but not limited to, developing and promoting 1, new Afrocentric pedagogies, 2, new curricula which takes into account the issue of language and indigenous knowledge systems, 3, research anchored on African ontologies and epistemologies, and finally, new program accreditation criteria. It is towards these ambitions and ambitious but very achievable ends that we have lined up the carefully chosen presentations and engagements in this high-level conference of starting today. These are envisaged to facilitate the creation of a clear, practical, and feasible blueprint to systematize, operationalize, and institutionalize African thought at the University of Zululand. Finally, it is clear that the creation of African thought at University of Zululand cannot be achieved by proclamation alone. It will have to be earned through hard work of intellectual inputs that will shape what it looks like. The fact notwithstanding, my view is that this label, African thought, should not be understood as static. Instead, it must be seen as a way of becoming and an intersection of African scholarship that privileges the ways of knowing of the global South. This perspective encourages continuous improvement and adaptation to prevailing and changing context of the time. With these few words, allow me once again to warmly welcome you to this landmark formal start of a long journey towards emancipation and wish you robust and productive engagements. Allow me to once again special thanks to our Minister, Dr. Nzimande, for availing himself, to colleagues who have traveled from far across the country and from overseas, as well as those that are joining us virtually to our beautiful country and province. I wish you lots of sunshine and productive deliberation in the next 3 days. You are all welcome, and I thank you.
I think we can make it a bit stronger than that. I think that was fine. I think that was indeed a fascinating presentation. Thank you, Vice Chancellor. I now have pleasure to invite the Chairperson of Council of the University of Zululand, Ms. N. Kaluza, to introduce the Honorable Minister. Ms. Kaluza.
Thank you, Program Director. You are greeted, and I believe you'll allow me to just say protocol observed so that I don't waste time. This conference with its theme, Advancing the African Thought, I'm requested to introduce the speaker who must present the opening address. I know very well that there are always two views, even on this one, of introducing the speaker. There are two views that may be existing here amongst yourselves. One view will be to say, please, Chair, take less than a minute to introduce this person. Sit down, just take less than a minute, introduce this person, tell us who he is in one sentence, and sit down because you are not the speaker yourself. But the other view will say, please help us understand and know this person better, so that whatever he says, we locate it properly. Chairpersons, by their nature and character, they are expected to accommodate all views and try to integrate. I will be that chairperson with no intention of introducing myself. It has been done. But I'm the chairperson of the Council of the University of Zululand. Just to help those who want me to do this task in one sentence, less than a minute. This is Dr. Bonginkosi Blade Nzimande, the son of Sipambano, a social and political activist, always engaged in an act of a revolution to ensure positive change and regarding every space he operates in as a site of struggle. That's one sentence, less than a minute, I've introduced him. Also, accommodating the other view, Dr. Bonginkosi Emmanuel Blade Nzimande is the Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation here in this country, South Africa, and he started as this minister in May 2019. Amongst his responsibilities is to lead projects and initiatives, part of which understanding that this conference that we are having is taking place after 2 years of COVID, harsh COVID, and I'm not suggesting that it is over. He introduced and led these initiatives to fight against COVID-19, including the establishment and funding of the genomic surveillance project that led to the discovery of variants of COVID-19. Dr. Nzimande also led the launch of the Hydrogen Society Roadmap, the establishment of the Interministerial Committee, IMC, on Science, Technology and Innovation, as well as leading the effort of the development of a COVID-19 local vaccine in South Africa, or for South Africa. Before May 2019, he served as the Minister of Transport from February 2018 and the Minister of Higher Education and Training from May 2009 until October 2017. Dr. Nzimande has served as a member of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, ANC, from 1994 till 2017, and again from 2019 till now. He was the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party from July 1998 until 16 July 2022. In July 2022, he was elected as the national chairperson of the South African Communist Party. Dr. Nzimande served as a member of parliament and chair of the portfolio committee between 1994 and 1999. Prior to the establishment of the Democratic South Africa in 1994, Dr. Nzimande had served in various roles as an anti-apartheid activist in academia, community organizations, and non-governmental organizations supporting the democratic labor movement. He is, I'm taking a risk here. I'm tempted to say he is an academic. I know that other people will say, but an academia must be practicing in an institution. As I said, there are always different views. Dr. Nzimande holds a doctorate in philosophy of sociology, specializing in industrial and labor studies from the University of Natal, and this was attained in 1992. He started his career as an industrial psychology intern in the Human Resource Department at Tongat Hewlett's Sugar in 1982, and subsequently employed as a human resources practitioner in the same company in 1993 to 1984. He lectured in industrial psychology at the University of Zululand between 1985 and 1987, and was a lecturer in industrial psychology in the Department of Psychology at the University of Natal between 1987 and 1989. He has also served in different university councils. In fact, in many universities as a member of the university council. I will not be wasting time on that. But what is also of importance is that Dr. Nzimande has published numerous academic and other articles covering politics, psychology, civil society, political violence, and labor studies over a period of close to 40 years. Now I think you can make a connection with that one sentence and this whole thing that I have said. We present to you the Minister of Higher Education, Science, and Innovation. This is an international conference. It's not just a University of Zululand conference, Minister. We present this audience to you for you to do the honorable thing, the opening address. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much. You may be seated. Thank you very much, Chair, although you broke our agreement, but that's fine. I will forgive you. Let me start by greeting the Program Director, Dr. Akbome, the Chairperson of the UNIZUL Council, Ms. Nomarashia Kaluza. Thanks for your kind introduction. Too long, but kind introduction. Let me also greet the Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Xoliso Mtose, and all your Deputy Vice Chancellors who are here. Let me particularly greet all our distinguished international guests and participants. In our tradition, you not guests. You know, you are brothers and sisters, and you are part of us. You happen to be located somewhere else geographically. But we are all part of the same family. Let me also greet other senior managers of the university, all the distinguished guest speakers, facilitators, and respondents, representatives from Universities South Africa, which is the organization representing our Vice Chancellors in South Africa, representative of students, trade unions, distinguished guests, members of the media, and indeed my office. I should greet my office. If I don't do that, I'm in big trouble, and you will never be able to get me here. if they become angry. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm greetings and good morning to everyone here. It really gives me a great pleasure to address what I understand to be the inaugural conference on African thought on my alma mater, the University of Zululand. I must start by saying that my formative undergraduate years were spent here, a place which is very close to my heart, not only because of the deep personal imprint that it has left on my own social and political imagination, but also because University of Zululand's history epitomizes the spirit of the oppressed to turn that which was designed for its subjugation into a source of emancipation. It's very important. I graduated here in 1980, having finished my degree in 1979. As I was driving up here, I was telling lots of stories in the cars, about my experiences coming to this institution and the fact that my home is about 300 kilometers from here? Yet it took us just 10 to 11 hours to reach this university. Just only 300 kilometers away because of apartheid and the difficulties in the mode of transport. Now, it is my understanding that the rationale for this conference stems from the University of Zululand strategic plan, and according to the organizers, your aim is to transform UniZulu, and I quote, into an authentic African university where epistemologies of the global South and indigenous African knowledges are privileged. As our contribution to the broader struggle for the total emancipation of the African people, we are taking bold, deliberate, and calculated steps to renegotiate and recontract with our local, provincial, national, continental, and planetary publics through a paradigm shift from the alienating colonial model, unquote. And I think the Vice Chancellor has actually also done a great job in simplifying this, in introducing this very important conference. This is indeed a bold and ambitious set of goals, which from the onset, I should say, I fully embrace and support. The process of privileging epistemologies of Africa and the global South, in my view, requires a multiplicity of interrelated tasks. And I'm going to highlight just 5. Firstly, the process of reclaiming, restoration, and promotion of a radically alternative worldview requires a systematic and planned strategy of capacity building, orientation and mobilization of the university scholarly community, both students and academics, to consciously develop new paradigms, bodies of knowledge, and modes of teaching and learning. This is not an easy task, and certainly also not a once-off task. Secondly, it will require University of Zululand to locate its efforts within a wider network of universities, both in South Africa and progressive locations in the global South, particularly, but not only the BRICS networks, Latin America, and of course, crucially, our wider continent. This means, per definition, that your Pan-Africanism must be linked to a broader, progressive internationalism. Thirdly, it should also be clear that any process of reconstruction will require a process of contestation and disruption of dominant paradigms, ideas, and narratives, thus implying that this community must actively engage in public discourse. In my political language, we call this umkhabul. Now, there's one thing that worries me. I need to say this. South Africa has produced so many commentators. Just about, you listen to every radio or you read any newspaper, a commentator is taken out of the box. The commentator part said, you know, government has announced this or this has happened, the commentator has said this. But my concern is that most of these commentators have no links to the academic world. It's not out of disrespect, don't misquote me, then I'm in trouble. But many of them, it looks like they wake up and read newspapers like myself, and then from those newspapers, then they become experts and commentators. It's very important for the voice of the academy to be heard in the public discourse as well. Informed by research, informed by scientific thinking. That's one of the tasks that we have, by the way, in advancing African epistemologies. Fourthly, the very act of linking your search for new epistemologies to the broader struggle for the total emancipation of African people, I'm quoting now from your own mission, means that you have to link the knowledge production project to the struggles of local communities for social, economic, and political emancipation. You said it very nicely, VC, on this, that you are striving to be an African university, a university of the global south, and a global university then, therefore through that, but also you are located in a particular region with its dynamics. In the United States, there's a very nice initiative I like of what are called anchor institutions. So University of Zululand must both be a global and African university, but also be an anchor institution in this part of the world. Fifthly, I would argue that in achieving what we want to do, we need to place indigenous knowledge system at the center of our epistemologies. The task of constructing and promoting Pan-African knowledge systems is not merely a scholarly and intellectual process. If it is to find its true potential, it must be an engaged Pan-Africanism, in which your work must be infused within wider mass struggles and social consciousness raising. This will require university intellectuals working in partnership with local and regional communities in co-creating radical alternatives to prevailing orthodoxies. Finally, I should point out, in just contextualizing what I want to say, I should also point out that Pan-African knowledge systems can only flourish in the context of a supportive ecosystem. Networks, what do I mean by this? Networks of institutions, centers, departments, writers and professionals, editors, publishing houses, investors, and so on. This is a very crucial thing. Very, very crucial that you have, actually, without an ecosystem, we can meet here conference after conference, we are not going to make any impact. Our ideas will always be locked at the Bonn Hotel in Richards Bay. Now, on universities, before I go there, let me also say this, that emphasize this, that without this support system, it cannot hope to survive and come of age. The university itself now, and I can simply point to the symbiotic and secular economic networks into which English liberal and Afrikaans intellectual traditions in our country are woven. Now, on universities, African epistemologies and transformation, it has now been some 28 years since the transition to political democracy in South Africa. And there is no doubt that tremendous progress has been made in many aspects of the higher education system that we inherited from apartheid. We have a new legislative and policy landscape. We have a single, more integrated and responsive system. We have new quality assurance systems. We have a unique student financial aid system that I haven't seen anywhere else in the world. By the way, Professor Mtose is tasked now in reimagining it, restructuring it. He's leading a ministerial task team on student funding in South Africa. We've also seen significant growth in access and success of Black and female students. and still slow but significant changes in the demographic profiles of our academics. These things are not small, they are very significant, which we achieved post-1994. I'm told now the latest statistics that women have just crossed 50% mark in South African academics. South African academics. Very important. Nonetheless, despite these advances in the institutional landscape of our higher education system, we still face formidable challenges in the transformation of the intellectual foundations of our university system. Our higher education system, as you know, has evolved over the three major historical periods: colonialism, apartheid, and more recently, the democratic era. Most of our 26 public universities were formed under colonialism, and later, of course, a few of them now, we've built only 2, unfortunately, new universities in a democratic South Africa. I'm working at 2 more, okay, and expanding campuses. But we are proud that we have got, I must say this, the single largest public university system in South Africa, which also acts as a resource for the rest of the continent, if truth be told. And we must protect it as we transform it. I'm also worried about the growth of private institutions in the continent, precisely also because these private institutions, they are of 2 types. One, very elite, they cater for the very wealthy, or they are fly-by-night catering for the poor. So strengthening a public university system, I would argue, is very central in building African epistemologies. I'm not trying to say you can't have things going wrong in public. You can, but it's very important that the idea of a public university system is reinforced. If I had time, I would argue more about this. Now, most of our 26 universities, as I have said, have got a particular historical context. And this historical context shaped the dominant social relations of knowledge production, knowledge forms, curricula, teaching pedagogies, research orientations, and academic and institutional cultures at these institutions. In other words, the fundamental design features, if you like, the DNA, the internal social structure, the institutional cultures, and modes of knowledge production of all our universities have been, and in a large measure remains to be, based on the English liberal arts model, transported by the British settlers during the long period of colonial rule. However, this did not prevent the emergence of other intellectual traditions, partly as a result of shifts in political power. For instance, the rise to power of Afrikaner nationalists in 1948 in our country paved the way for the vigorous promotion of Afrikaans Christian nationalist intellectual traditions. And the post-1960 period also saw the establishment of many so-called homeland or Bantustan universities. This was established as a Bantustan university, University of Zululand. That's why I'm very proud that despite the challenges you have, we have reached this stage, and also seeking consciously to redefine yourselves as to who you are. By the way, these universities, there were 3 universities in our days. If you're a black South African of my hue, you could go only to Fort Hare, or go in the Eastern Cape, or go to Tefluop in the north, or go to University of Zululand, and ethnically defined. University of Zululand was reserved for Zulu speakers, Ndebele speakers, and Siswati speakers. That was it. So it was your university. I had to leave a university which was 10 kilometers away from my home. I'm looking for my letter, by the way, that was written by the minister, because I tried to apply to the University of Natal. Pete Korenhoff, that minister of apartheid, said, but you can't go to University of Natal. There is your university, because I'm Zulu speaking. Now, nevertheless, the English liberal arts epistemic traditions have tended to remain dominant, mainly because they were locked into and supported by a much wider multinational Anglo-Saxon knowledge economy. These official epistemic doctrines have, of course, been challenged throughout our history by students and insurgent intellectuals. I don't want to give an idea that this was just unproblematically these discourses reproducing themselves. They were challenged in struggle. This was the case in different periods of our history in South Africa. I'm sure we can tell the same history of our entire continent, different countries and generally. For example, the rise of African nationalist and Pan-Africanist ideas that fought here in the 1930s and 1940s, the Black consciousness movement in the 1970s from the late 60s, the Marxist and African humanist ideas that found its way into several of our universities, maturing in particular during the 1980s, which was the decade that then our people mobilized themselves to towards dislodging the apartheid regime from power. What made these insurgent epistemic traditions distinctive is that they were rooted in social and political struggles waged by students, academics, communities, and workers. At the core of these struggles was a strong desire to transform what Paulo Freire called the pedagogy of the oppressed into a pedagogy of emancipation. One focusing on social justice, radical equality, democratic citizenship, and so on. In one of the languages of our struggle in South Africa in 1980s, this was called People's Education for People's Power. These insurgent epistemic traditions, in my view, were always political, by the way, and always rooted in mass struggles. This is, of course, not unique about the South African experience. That's why you will hear the rest of my speech. It's more around also the concrete challenges that are facing us, so that we do not only philosophize about our realities, but we seek to change them. I'm still a great believer of that quotation by Karl Marx. Philosophers have interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. Yes, sir. Fundamental. You will hear my input. The political nature and social character of knowledge production has long been recognized by liberation movements and articulated in the writings of leaders such as, unfortunately, they were all male at the time, Julius Nyerere with his notion of Ujamaa, Amilcar Cabral with his notion of culture and liberation, Frantz Fanon on the issue of colonialism, many others. What made these ideas resonant was that they were rooted in wider mass movements and not simply, important as it is, amongst university scholars. Taken to its logical conclusions, a radical Pan-Africanism is therefore also one aimed at disrupting and transforming dominant relations of power in society as a whole. When I was appointed by the President as Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation now, the way I have defined as one of the key challenges that faces me and everybody in this sphere is the necessity to transform the relations of knowledge production in South Africa and in our continent, and I dare say globally. Because dominant relations of knowledge production are still patriarchal, are still racist, and are still elite. That is what we have inherited. Part of the transformation and creating an African epistemology also has to tackle this. That's why I hope the ideas of Pan-Africanism being debated at today's conference will be progressive and internationalist in orientation, examining different approaches that can interact with other traditions of thought, particularly those committed to social justice and class equality, anti-racism and anti-imperialism, gender equality and against patriarchy, thoughts and traditions that are for participatory democracy, and very important, thoughts and traditions that are for ecological justice and sustainability. It is for this reason that I contend that a progressive Pan-Africanism must place anti-racism, gender equality, and anti-imperialism at its core. I'm not saying this, I'm contributing to a debate already. So I'm not expecting everybody to agree with me. But if this contributes to a debate, then I would have achieved my aim with this introduction or the opening remarks that I've been asked to do. One of the remarkable things about the global capitalist system has been its capacity, at least to date, over the past 300-400 years, to have survived many serious ruptures and crises over hundreds of years, despite deep-seated internal contradictions. There are, of course, many reasons for this, not least the use of force. Colonialism, by the way, was a very essential part of building a global capitalist system. Very important that we understand that you can't divorce the global capitalist system from colonialism. How interesting that at the United Nations last week, the United States and many other European countries were pushed for a resolution at the UN for Russia to pay reparations for the damage that it has caused in Ukraine. The very same countries who have refused to pay reparations for slavery and colonialism. And they expect us to support them on this as African countries, but who have been saying reparations is needed for the enormous damage caused by slavery and colonialism. But then they expect us to walk behind them in the United Nations, lest Russia, give reparations to the Ukraine. No. Part of a radical Pan-Africanism is to be principled as well. The old man, one of the old men who I learned a lot, the late Harry Quad, used to say, Europeans, they fight amongst themselves and then they declare that a world war. Yet it's Europe fighting against itself, but it's a world war, World War I, World War II. There are, of course, many reasons. I've spoken about this. Capitalism has had its own main source of its own reproduction promoted by powerful corporate interests, mass media, political parties, and through our educational systems. In this narrative, for instance, neoliberal capitalism is preserved in trans-historical terms, as it has been with us forever, as if it's a natural phenomenon and without any workable alternatives. However, in recent years, this system and its central tenets have been in serious crisis, especially after the global financial crisis of 2007-2008. Whilst there have been previous periods of crisis in the history of capitalism, what makes the present-day crisis serious, arguably, is the existential risks it poses, not only to capitalism itself, but to the future of the planet. The threat we are faced with now is actually about the continued existence of this only planet that we have. So African epistemology has to grapple with this reality because we can't be distant. We are the least contributor to carbon emissions, yet we are paying the biggest price as the continent. That's where also African scholarship needs to be seen and be heard and analyze and engage. Colleagues, we are meeting at the time when the world is being battered by a series of convergent crises of neoliberal economic globalization, ecological sustainability, social inequality, and collectively these and cumulatively, they register all the hallmarks of a generalized global planetary crisis. As the crisis deepens, we are also witnessing elites in powerful nations relentlessly stoking all sorts of geopolitical tensions, most notably with China, by the way, presumably to deflect attentions of their domestic publics from the real problems. In fact, the problem we are faced with now is an empire that is on the decline. And empires, when they decline, they don't go on a whim. You know? Sometimes they even say, we are not going down alone. Because clearly the United States is being overtaken in many respects now by China. And what is worse, which doesn't go down kindly, is that it's a China that's ruled by communists. How can we have a system ruled by communists, threatening not by arms or nuclear war, but by ideas and innovation? It's threatening to actually overcome us. That is why Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan, because in essence she had one mission. It's about the control of microchips and its technology. That now the United States goes out to say nobody who trades with the United States in microchips must trade with China. And then we can't understand our continent outside also of these realities, because they happen to have a huge global impact in terms of what they do. Now, these tipping points, the crisis I'm talking about, points to what some distinguished scholars have called a metabolic rift, a rupture in the interaction between humanity and the rest of nature, following the destructive forms of capitalist production, therefore threatening the life-giving systems of the earth. The current planetary scale crisis is unprecedented in that it poses an existential threat to the future of humanity. At its core, as the International Panel on Climate Change has starkly warned, has been steadily rising levels of global warming, unmistakably induced by human social and economic activity over the past 200, 300 years of global industrial development. Whilst there are natural drivers of climate change, it is now widely accepted that human factors have directly altered the biophysical dynamics of the earth. This we have to engage with as African scholars. It's part of African scholarship because it's our reality. That's why even our indigenous knowledge systems may perhaps partly be a solution to some of these problems that we are actually facing. The historical record is replete with much longer periods than the recent history of capitalism, demonstrating an alternative set of values on the basis of which, by the way, our species survived for more than 300,000 years. Again, indigenous knowledge becomes important. In fact, the first humans, Africans, our great ancestors, could have only survived their incredible exodus across the continent into what is now known as Europe and the New World some 70,000 years ago on the strength of cooperation and solidarity, not on the strength of dog eat dog. You know, by the way, today we are told that if you want to grow and develop as a country, these are the things you must do. If you don't do them, you are forced to do them. Follow a certain model of macroeconomic policies. You know, all countries that are successful have privatized and so on. But none of the developed countries went through that route to reach where they are today. They are asking us to follow a path that they never followed. Now, this for me also is another crucial issue of an African epistemology and analyzing what we are about. The values that are still held onto by Africans across the continent still today. Ubuntu, sharing, communalism, and compassion, and can be directly traced back to this great historical experience I'm talking about. In my view, neither the essentialist claims about human nature and the inevitability of capitalism stand up against the critical scrutiny of history. Now, just on knowledge production, innovation, and South Africa's current crisis. The South African economy, which is deeply integrated into this new global economy, is currently facing stark challenges with legacies of social inequality and economic exclusion built over 3 centuries of apartheid colonial history. Today, there is widespread agreement that substantial changes must be made to overcome deep structural barriers to economic participation by black people in the economy. There is also agreement that we require a capable developmental state. You can't have African thought that doesn't grapple with the post-colonial state, for instance. Okay? Also, we can't continue just blaming external factors and also not critically looking at ourselves and the mistakes that the post-colonial state in the continent has also made. Of course, most of those mistakes are not disconnected to the global realities we face, but nevertheless, we need to do that. The most important requirement, therefore, in my view, is to create space for millions of our people to reclaim their sense of agency over their own lives in the production of food, energy, education, community safety, and security in sustainable livelihoods. We need a capable state as a partner working with, but not to displace or usurp the crucial role to be played by citizens, communities in shaping our common futures. If we are to overcome the serious existential challenges facing our people, the multiple crises of climate change, energy, food, and social crises, our entire developmental model must be one rooted in a mass-based participatory approach. We must therefore dismantle patronage in all its guises and forms, and we must place the role of grassroots organizations of youth, women, elderly, traders, local business, workers at the center, not just of our developmental model, but also at the center of African thought. Because we are dealing with real, living social categories of people. In this context, capacity building through knowledge and skills are of critical importance. It requires an education system that reflects and transforms the realities of the lived experiences of our people. It must be rooted in African realities, drawing on the cultural and social ingenuity of our ways of being and solving problems at a local level. This ingenuity I'm talking about, as I once again remind you, is rooted in a long history of survival, predating the colonial experience by thousands of years. It is in this context where African pedagogies and technologies come into being, as they are organically rooted in what people already know, deeply embedded ways of being and knowing, and pass from one to the next generation. Colonialism and apartheid certainly disrupted and distorted many of these ways of being, and we need to engage with this reality. When COVID-19 pandemic erupted, our domestic economy had already passed through 2 consecutive quarters of recession, marked by major job losses in key economic sectors. COVID has caused huge devastation in the African continent. In fact, science tells us that we've entered the age of pandemics. And as South Africa, we are very, as Africa, we are very vulnerable. That's why one of the things, whilst I'm still a minister, I am preoccupied with now is to work towards setting up a multidisciplinary African center on the study of pandemics. Very crucial. Related to that, I have a mission, whether I'm still minister or not, to push for the funding of a research and development agenda in the African continent for the African continent. That hopefully that agenda is not donor-driven or donor-determined. I can tell you right now I've become a little bit reluctant though when the media is here, because then they start saying things sometimes that I haven't said, you know. Right now, Europe is facing a huge challenge of energy because of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Now, they've identified that they need to seek for new sources. And Africa is a possibility for hydrogen, for wind energy, and for a whole range of things. Now, many governments are faced with a very difficult situation, because how do we collaborate with this, but in a manner that will advance our own agenda, not in a manner that will lead to our own recolonization? These are some of the practical, concrete issues that African thought must grapple with if it is indeed to be African thought. In other words, rooted in challenges that we are facing. I have confidence that University of Zululand, with this, will be able to make its own major contribution as one platform for these engagements. Of course, there are many ways through which University of Zululand can pursue its developmental agenda or goals. In the interest of brevity, I will simply highlight 3 areas by way of example in which you can play a seminal role in line with the goals stated by this conference. Firstly, there is the challenge of achieving a just transition in the transition from carbon-intensive to more climate-friendly forms of energy. The issue of a just energy transition is at the heart of our own survival. This is a challenge common to all developing countries of the global south. To build sustainable sources of renewable energy production and supply at local level, organized in micro and meso level grids, is going to be key to a future likely to be disrupted by climate events. The university must build African knowledge systems to support the production of solar energy and green hydrogen energy, and form part of the wider national efforts by government to promote long-term energy security and sovereignty. We get reminded when we get these periodic blackouts. For instance, the Hydrogen South Africa Roadmap strategy, which was announced by Cabinet earlier this year, provides major strategic opportunities to all our universities to join hands in the national effort to secure our energy futures. Professor Ebo Mandaza, some of you will know him, a very distinguished African scholar, is on a mission now to establish a Pan-African university that is going to focus on policy studies, building capacity in the continent to research and produce policies that are actually beneficial to us. And when we engaged, I said, Ibo, one thing you must put at the center of that university and policy is on science, technology, and innovation policy. Very crucial, and it tends to be left behind. African thought can't leave behind matters of science, technology, and innovation. I'm not saying this because I'm a minister. I'm saying this because of facts, and I have already argued why in many respects. It is hoped, therefore, that the bioeconomy strategy, for instance, of our Department of Science and Innovation, provides exciting new opportunities for the use of indigenous knowledge systems to promote food sovereignty, amongst other things. It focuses on building the resilience and adaptive capabilities of community-based economies based on localized food production, trading, and cooperative networks. And such a bioeconomy strategy, by way of example, promotes indigenous knowledge system innovations. It is hoped, therefore, that University of Zululand will target its faculties of science, arts, and commerce to actively engage in this space, as it opens up huge opportunities for novel experiments, student entrepreneurship, and enterprise development rooted in the cultures and ecologies of local communities. You will understand this is an international conference, Prof. I agree with you, but it's taking place at the University of Zululand. So then I can't just talk global, international, Africa, much as this is nice, and leave my university behind to say, how can you use your own institutional culture to be able to advance this initiative that you have actually started? Another opportunity, another example of new opportunities in which University of Zululand could really play a highly innovative role is that of the development of indigenous languages, using artificial intelligence tools that are now increasingly available in the market. You'll remember, Prof, we recently undertook a visit with yourself to the Silicon Valley in the United States to say, okay, what can we learn from this Silicon Valley? And also we met with Google Deep Learning. And what they said there was very interesting, because they said we can rapidly accelerate the development and use of indigenous languages, drawing on machine learning and deep learning tools in both social and commercial life. And Africa has a huge advantage because of the thousands of languages and language dialects that we have. Now, what's likely to happen? Others are going to come from outside and exploit this language advantage for their own end. So part of the African thought, how do we use our own languages as sources of development? As you know, also language is the most powerful transmitter of cultural and social values, and its future development beyond social communication is vital if we are to foreground African epistemologies, as this conference is seeking to do. Finally, let me make a few points. I have to say that one of the things that pains me deeply in recent years had been to witness, this is now something very close to my heart, has been the neglect and degradation of public and community libraries, including here in this province, by the way. This hurts me deeply. I recently visited a public library in my hometown, in Pietermaritzburg, and was alarmed to find out that they lacked basic digitization equipment to copy and preserve precious archival material of our history. Yet it is one of the few libraries of record in our country. I think we've got about 9 libraries of record in South Africa. Perhaps UniZulu can team up with other institutions like UKZN, DUT, and MUT to collaborate with local government and the Department of Arts and Culture to save our public and community libraries. These are very important resources, by the way, even in terms of what we want to do. I can see there is another champion of libraries who is clapping hardest, but the others are not joining in clapping together with her. Having focused on these local examples, I must reiterate the central argument that a progressive tradition of African knowledge systems can only succeed in reaching its true social and economic potential if it is joined up with a wider set of pan-African and pan-developing world alliances. I want to briefly cite just 3 areas where I think much work has to be done. In 2023, South Africa is chairing the BRICS Countries Forum, and we will have an opportunity to expand this network and its impact on the struggle for an inclusive multilateral global system, not one based on unilateralism, military aggression, and imperialism. African thought has to promote peace and development, because you can never have peace, by the way, if you don't have development. The two things go together. Also, I've mentioned the effort by Professor Ibo Mandaza, which we are supporting as a department, of this idea of a pan-African university aimed at tackling what we call, in the language of our Department of Science and Innovation, the grand challenges facing humanity, which, by the way, African thought also have to grapple with. My own wish to work towards an African research, as I have said, an innovation foundation, to work across the continent to drive game-changing breakthrough science and technology innovations to underpin the quest of the African continent, to break free from the grip of neo-colonial dependency, imperial patronage, and underdevelopment. In conclusion, may I reiterate that a progressive Pan-African and South-South knowledge paradigm requires us to be an engaged scholarly community, aspiring to be organic and not comprador. Okay? We must aspire to be organic and not be an extension of sometimes, or in many instances, interests that are against what we want to be as a continent. As intellectuals rooted in the lived experience of our people, it also requires this progressive Pan-African and South-South knowledge paradigms, an open, self-critical intellectual disposition, able to place its worldview firmly on the ground while selectively appropriating, adapting, and assimilating the insights and experiences of other worldviews that are compatible with historic interests. This is important because some people, interpret Pan-Africanism that we only concentrate on ourselves, on the continent, and so on. We must engage the rest of the world boldly and confidently from our own Pan-African perspectives and seek to engage with the whole world and not to lock ourselves into some little corner. Now, I have sought to raise epistemological issues through, as I have said, concrete challenges facing us and the world, our continent and our country. Because generating theories from analysis of concrete conditions, theories must always derive from that, by the way, is as equally important as concrete actions being informed by theoretical clarity. Now, one of my favorites, some of you may disagree, revolutionaries and intellectual, was a Russian by the name of Lenin. He puts this, what I'm trying to say this here, very aptly. He said, theory without practice is sterile, and practice without theory is blind. Okay? I still think this remains an important point of departure for African epistemology. It's part of the inheritance of revolutionary experience and language that can help us. May I wish you well with this promising conference, and once more, congratulate my alma mater for this initiative. That's why I'm proudly wearing my blazer today. Thank you very much.
While standing, can we continue with the ovation? It's what the English call a standing ovation, please. Yeah. And at this moment, the Vice Chancellor and Principal will take the honor to hand over the token of appreciation from the university to the Honorable Minister. I am happy that I'm not the one who is going to speak directly after the minister, because he set the bar so high that you would tremble if you were not prepared. When we do this kind of events, we expect political functionaries to come and say, sometimes sterile administrative things, and then we say, let's get on with the conference. The minister has gone or the president has gone. But unfortunately, that's not what has happened today. He has set the bar very high. Thank you so much, Minister. One more time, colleagues, please. Thank you. And I'm also happy, on behalf of the conference organizers, in particular the Vice Chancellor and the DVC Institutional Support, that we do have speakers who will not lower the bar. We do have speakers who, I'm looking at them now, and they know that they won't lower the bar. Thank you so much. With great pleasure, I would like now that we proceed. We've not gone so much over time, and these time guides, we know that. The schedule is a guide to carry us on. It is not one of those orthodoxies, Mr. Minister, that we have to follow. The schedule is just a guide that will guide us. We will now invite for the first invited keynote address, which will be delivered by Professor Michael West. He will be duly introduced by the chair of that session, who is none other than another one of our indefatigable leaders at the University of Zululand, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Institutional Support, Professor Sipho Siepe. Prof. Siepe.
Good morning. Dumelang. Minister Blade Boyinkosi Emmanuel Nzimande, the Vice Chancellor of the University, and most importantly, our Chairperson of Council. Minister, this would not have been possible without the Chair of Council directing us to move in this direction. For that, ma'am, we are very grateful. I consider the Minister's presentation, Vice Chancellor, to be more of a line of march. We have tried to put together a concept paper to guide us. But what the Minister has done is to sophisticate it, but also to complicate it. And we're still grateful. I have the pleasure of inviting our friend, and the Minister did indicate that when we meet as Africans, wherever we are, it's about a family gathering. This year, myself and the VC had the pleasure of visiting Pennsylvania State University, where we asked Professor Michael West to grace this occasion. I'm here to introduce him in 1 minute. I will not do what my chair had actually done by integrating different perspectives. Professor West is a professor of American Studies, History, African Studies, and currently the head of African American Studies at the Pennsylvania State University. He has published extensively in the fields of South African history. When we were in Penn State, Michael was telling us about his escapades in Umtata, in Bisho, in Harare. He was mentioning all these places. And you could see that he is a professor who's rooted in engagement with communities, not looking at communities through lenses that are out of focus, which is what the minister was saying about most of the academy and academics in this country, that when we look at the reality, it is through reading, not engaging. He's also a professor. He studied Pan-Africanism and has written extensively in that area. And his current research, Minister, you'll be very impressed, is to reflect and look at the Black Power movement in global perspectives. Without much ado, may I ask Professor West to do us the honor.
Thank you, Professor Siepe. The moderator noted that the bar has been set, and indeed the bar can only go lower from here. I tremble to speak after the minister. You're lucky here in South Africa to have a minister of the caliber and the commitment, the profundity, the good humor, I might add, of Dr. Indimande. I've been hearing a good deal about him in recent weeks. I gather there are some people in South Africa who, some officials in South Africa who have a habit of making statements that are uncomplimentary to foreigners, and particularly to African foreigners. But our minister has a reputation for working the Pan-African circuit. And I've had multiple reports about his activities in that regard in recent weeks. In Dakar, I've spoken with people in Harare in recent days. I came here from Harare last night, and the minister's name is on multiple lips. I want to thank you for your Pan-Africanism, Minister. Thank you. It is a great pleasure and indeed a signal honor to have been invited to address this August forum. I am to thank the conveners for the invitation. I met two of them, the Vice Chancellor and the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Institutional Support, Professors Ntosi and Siepe earlier this year. They were visiting, as Professor Siepe previously mentioned, my place of work, the Pennsylvania State University in the United States, and my co-worker